we have is, ladies and gentlemen, we will solve a quadratic equation, which is, reminder, quadratic equation is just ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0. And I think I went over this item here, which is, again, now we have this formula. This is a very, very powerful formula, ladies and gentlemen, in the sense that whatever quadratic equation you have, you can just plug into this formula and you can solve it, right? So this is what I told you guys is, again, to solve for a quadratic formula, the first thing you need to do is identify your A, your B, and your C. And once you can identify your A and your B, your C, all you need to do is plug into the formula and solve for X, which is, again, this is what we have before, right? This is what we have before in terms of x squared minus 2x minus 15 equal to 0. Before this quadratic equation, what we do is we solve this by factor, right? We ask ourselves, is there two numbers multiplied to give us 15 but subtract to give us 2? Which is, we know that 5 times 3 is 15, which is x minus 5, x plus 3, right? And again, we factor them out, and then we take each of your parentheses and we set equal to 0. And then once we set equal to 0, we solve this by either add or subtract to the other side. This is what we have, right? Which is, again, we have this, which is now in the sense of 11.2, which is 11.2. In order for you to do 11.2, the first thing you want to do is you want to identify your A, your B, and your C. Reminder, your A is the number in front of your x squared, which is in front of x squared is 1. Your B is the number in front of x, which is your x is -2. And your C is the constant, which is 15, right? So looking at this thing here, all we need to do is, once you identify that, all you need to do is plug it in your formula, which is negative B, which is negative, which is my B is negative. So negative of -2 plus or minus b squared, which is -2 squared, minus 4ac, which is a is 1, c is 15, divided by 2 times a, which is 2 times 1, which is, again, if you take this and you simplify, which is, once you plug it in this equation here, right? Once you plug it into this equation here that you have, all you do is simplify this item, which is, again, a negative times a negative will give me a positive, right? -2, negative of a -2 will be +2. -2 times -2 would be 4. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times -15, or -4 times -15 will give me +60. 2 times 1 is 2. So again, after you plug in, all you do is your calculator can help you, which is you multiply this thing out. And once you have this thing here, which is, as you can see, 6 plus 4 will give you 64. And what is a square root of 64? Well, a square root of 64 is 8. Once we have this thing here, we know that 2 plus or minus 8, meaning 2 plus 8 and 2 minus 8, which is 2 plus 8 will give me 10. 10 divided by 2 will give me 5. And 2 minus 8, sorry, 2 minus 8 is -6. It's not 6. 2 minus a is -6. Well, I got it there, right? The negative on the outside, I didn't see it. 2 minus a is -6. -6 divided by 2 will give me -3. As you can see, the two answer is the same, right? We have x equal 5, x equal -3 is the same over here, which is 5 and -3. So, ladies and gentlemen, once we know this formula here, sorry for all those, but again, once we this formula is very powerful, that now we don't need to factor. We don't need to factor to solve it. So on your final exam, if they ask you to solve and they ask you to factor, solve by factor, we don't need to factor anymore. If you remember this formula, then all you need to do is plug into this formula and solve it out, right? So again, same thing go, which is, again, let's take a look at this problem. Last time, if you remember this in 6.6, right? If you remember this in 6.6, which is, again, this is what we have, which is they ask you to solve, right? And to solve this thing here, if you remember to solve this thing here, let's attack this before, right? Before, we have to solve it by factor. And to factor, we have to do the AC method, right? So again, this kind of review from last time too, which is if you do the AC method, we know that we have to take the 2 times the 15 to give me 30. We have to ask ourselves, is that 2 number multiplied to give you 30 that add together to give me 11, which is 6 times 5, right? And again, what do? We have to rewrite this problem as in 2x squared minus 6x minus 5x plus 15, right? And then we group them up, and then we factor them out, which is in the first group, we can factor out at 2. In the second group, we can factor out at 5. And then again, x minus 3, 2x minus 5 equal to 0, which is again, looking at this thing here, we take the first parenthesis, set equal to 0, take the second parenthesis, set equal to 0, and then solve, which is we can see that this is what we have is we have x equal to 3 and x equal to 5 over 2. So this is what we did before. This is what we did in chapter 6.6, right? So let's take a look at this thing here, which is now on your final exam, you don't need to do the AC method for solving. If you see this, which is we can use your quadratic equation, which is your quadratic equation is this, which is again negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a, right? So if you plug it in, this is what you have, which is again negative b, which is negative, and again, as you can see, I color coded, right? Kind of color code this thing here. Negative of b, which is negative of a negative 11, b squared, which is negative 11 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 4 times 2, times c, which is 15, all over 2a, which is 2 times 1, right? So again, looking at this thing here, which is again, once you have this thing here, which is a negative of a negative 11 will be positive 11. Negative, one thing, ladies and gentlemen, inside here, even though it's negative, when you square them up, negative times a negative, this number, the b squared will always be positive, okay? The b squared will always be positive in that case. So make sure that you have, that item is always positive right here. So 11 times 11 or negative 11 times negative 11 is 121. And again, 4 times 2 will give me 6. 6 times 15 will give me 120. Everybody see that? Which is now, what do I have? Which is, everybody see that I have 11 plus or minus 121 minus 120 will give me 1. Which is, what is square root of 1? Which is, do you agree that square root of 1 is equal to 1? So now, the only thing different now is this, ladies and gentlemen, 11 plus or minus 1 is this, which is 11 plus 1 and 11 minus 1. Okay, so this is what we have is 11 plus 1 will give me 12. 12 divided by 4 will give me 3. 11 minus 1 will give me 10. 10 divided by 4, which is you reduce this 10 over 4, you reduce it to 5 half. Okay. So question with this thing here, question with this item that we have here. Any questions so far? If you don't have a question, which is again, this is what we're going to do today, which is again, we will practice this quadratic formula, right? And again, like I say, this quadratic formula is very powerful. Why is powerful, or what method, why is so powerful? Because of this problem here, right, ladies and gentlemen. Let's take a look at example 1. Somebody mic is still on. Can I try to mute the mic, but it's not. Whoever mic is on, see if you can mute the mic for me. Again, unless you guys have question, but if you don't have question, please mute your mic for me. So looking at this thing here, the reason why I say this formula, the formula up here is very powerful is back then in chapter 6, the only thing we can do is factor. If you cannot factor, we say we give up. That's prime. We cannot do anything. But this now, ladies and gentlemen, with this formula, no matter what quadratic equation you have, you can always plug it in and simplify them out. It doesn't have to be a problem that you can factor. It can be any problem at all. So looking at this thing here, if you know this problem, you still can factor, the next problem you cannot. But looking at this thing here, if you don't want to factor this, let's take a look at this quadratic equation. So what do we need to do? Well, the first thing we need to do is, first of all, I did not mention this, but make sure that your equation is equal to 0. And then once your equation is equal to 0, make sure to identify what is your A, what's your B, and what is your C term, which is my A in this case is 3, my B is -7, and my C is -20. Now, all I need to do is plug it in, which is, remember, the formula is up here, right? I wrote a formula up here for you guys to see on every page, which is, that's your formula, which is -b, which is negative of a -7, plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So looking at this thing here, which is, again, negative and negative will give you a positive, which is +7. 7 times 7 will give you 49. This item, like I mentioned right here, ladies and gentlemen, this item right here will always be positive. And again, this thing here can be positive or negative, as you will see later, which is a negative times a negative will give me a positive, which is, again, 4 times 3 will give me 12. 12 times 20 will give me 240 all over 6. And again, if I add this thing here, which is 7 plus or minus square root of 89. And again, this is where the problem come in, which is 89. We have to ask ourselves, is this a perfect square? Which is, you can